Okay, so let me share this screen, and then we can. Uh, so what we are going to do is the basic group theory today, and so you know that group theory is essentially associated with some symmetry. Okay, so the words which are very closely related is symmetry, and of course there is some kind of a set that is used, and then you have some words like invariance and conservation. Okay, and of course in quantum mechanics a related concept is degeneracy, and then of course a few other mm, things that we come across. So essentially, if you have, let's say, a set, as you might have studied in your earlier childhood, that it is just like a collection. So we always say that it's a collection of some objects or elements. Mathematically, we call an element collection of elements. And to define set, we don't have to have any rule to define these elements. For example, I can say that some number and some apple, and then I can say some stone. These are objects, and then I can put an alpha here, and then Z, okay, and then so I can have mutually unrelated things. There should not be any. So apple is not same as one number, and stone is different from apple. This is in some sense inorganic. This is organic. This is Greek. This is English. This is numeral. And I can also have some kind of symbol like this. Okay, I can have slash. These are all different elements, but I can define a set like this. So I simply have to put some elements together. That's all. I will define a set. And of course, some of you might have studied something called the set theory, which is very early on in your school days. You study. You have two sets, then you can define union of sets, intersection of sets. One set is a subset of the other. Okay, and you have something called Venn diagrams. So all these things you study under set theory. Now we want to uh, define certain structures on the set. Okay, so now you have to say some structure on the set. Okay, so if you define some structure on the set, that means now your set cannot be arbitrarily any collection, but your set should be such that there is some structure. That means, let us say that so structure on set, one particular structure is what we call as a group, and there can be different structures. Okay, there are something called rings, something called modules. Okay, so there are some vector spaces. All these things will come under different structures on the set. Okay, so we are interested in groups. So when a set can be qualified to be a group, So that means, so we have to define something called a binary composition law, or sometimes you call it as a binary composition rule. This is very important. So you have a set, some set, and you have a binary composition law. Okay, so let us say, let G be the set. Okay, so G is the set. Okay. Now the set will have certain elements, right? That means this G can have certain elements, which I will write it as G1, G2, G3, etc. You can have probably some n elements. Okay, so this Gi, they are called elements of G. Okay, so right now this G is only a set, elements of set G. Okay, then we have a concept, we define something called cardinality. Cardinality of G. Cardinality of G is defined as number of elements. Number of elements of G. So in this case, so in this example, in this case, cardinality of G, let me write this as card of G is equal to n. There are n elements, and hence this is equal to n. Okay, now you have to define something called a binary composition law. Now, what do you mean by binary? Binary is something related with 2. Okay, so binary composition law, or sometimes we call as binary operation. Binary operation. Now, what is a binary operation? So it is a rule. It is a rule to compose or combine two elements. Okay, any two elements. Any two elements of G. Okay, you are giving a rule to combine any two elements of G. Okay, so that is what is called a binary operation. That means if you take G1 and you take G2, then I should be able to combine them. Okay, so let me define this binary operation to be some O here. Okay, G1, G2, you should be able to combine. Okay, so this is the combined effect. Okay, this O can be so the possible O's that we are familiar could be an addition if they are numbers, okay, or a multiplication, etc. So these are some of the binary operations that we are familiar with. Okay, now please understand, the moment you are able to define a binary operation, that means the elements of the set cannot be arbitrary. like the set that we have defined, one apple, it cannot be like that, because one and apple, we will not be able to define any operation by using which we can combine them. Okay, or alpha and stone, I don't know what kind of operation will combine them. The moment we say that we are able to define some binary operation, that fixes that the set should be of some restricted type. Set cannot be arbitrary set. There should be some kind of a relation among the elements of the set. Only then a binary, a combination of these two is something which can be defined. Mathematically, a binary composition can be defined as a map. Okay, a map from G cross G, because we are taking two elements, we will define that as G cross G. Okay, to some codomain. We do not know what this codomain is, but it may be some codomain. So if you are able to define, that means you can say that if I write down this O will be a map from G cross G to, let's say, some codomain. So let me call this as some D. Okay. Now we have a very important structure that we are going to define, and this is what I will call it as the first axiom of this one, that this is called closure property. Closure property. Okay, what do we mean by a closure property? Closure property says that for every G1 or Gi, comma Gj in G, Gi operated on Gj or Gi composed to Gj should also be in G. Okay, should also be in G. That means you compose any two elements, you should not get a result which is outside G. Okay, so then we say that G is closed. G is closed under the binary composition. G is closed under binary composition. Okay, so let us. It's not very easy. It's not very difficult to find examples, but let me give you an example. So first, let me give you an example of a set and a binary operation such that it is not closed. Okay. So consider a set like this. Let's call this as N. The set is 1, 2, 3, etc. So these are all natural numbers, 1, 2, 3, etc. And binary operation, binary composition is, let's say, subtraction. So if I use subtraction as a binary composition, then you can say 2 minus 3. Okay, 2 is 2 and 3 are in n, but 2 minus 3 is not in n. So that implies what? That implies n is not closed. N is not closed under this operation minus. Now, if you change, suppose you take n and then you take plus. Okay, sometimes we call this is as an algebraic structure. Okay, so we call this an algebraic structure. Okay, so if I take the set n and plus, then you know that it is closed. Correct? So n plus is closed, but n minus is not closed. N minus is not closed. Now, if you can see that, consider set of all integers. Okay, so let us define Z as set of all integers. Okay, then you can see Z minus is closed. Okay, n minus is not closed, but Z minus is closed. So this is how you have to find examples where a set with a binary composition is closed or not. And for an algebraic structure to be a group, it has to be closed. Okay, closure property is important for a set and a binary operation to become a group. So closure property is the first important property that a set with a binary composition should satisfy. Second property or second important axiom is that this is called associative property. Associative property. What is associativity? Associativity is, so for any Gi, Gj, Gk, for any three elements belonging to set G, okay, we should have Gi composed of the result of composition of Gj and Gk is same as Gi composition of Gj composition of Gk. That means, this essentially means order of composing is not important. You can compose first these two or first these two, doesn't matter. You get the same result. Okay, so this is the property called associative property. Okay, so now let us see what happens if, so let us again look at an example. So consider an example. For example, you take Z with minus. Okay, so you take Z with minus. Okay, this was closed. Okay, so first thing we have seen that this is closed. Okay, now is it associative? Okay, so we ask this question: is this associative? So, for example, let us say that you have, let us take -4. So -3, 1, 5, something like that. Let's say this. Then what is our binary composition? Binary composition is minus. So let's say -4, -1, -5. So this is equal to how much? -5 minus 5 is -10. That is combining these two first and then combining with this. Or I write -5 minus 1 minus 5. So this is equal to 1 minus 5 is -4, and this minus into minus is plus, so this will be 0. So we can see that this is not associative. This is not associative. On the other hand, if you look at the example of this Z with plus, okay, this is closed. There is no doubt this is closed, and this is also associated. Also associated. Okay, that you can easily verify. So Z plus is closed. So just like in the previous example, N minus is not even closed. N plus is closed. Z minus is closed, but Z minus is not associative. Z plus is closed and associative. Okay, so an algebraic structure. So at this point, let me just say that so an algebraic structure let's call this as G and some binary operation G0. Okay, an algebraic structure G0 that is closed and associative. Is called a semigroup. There are actually 4 conditions. Out of them, if 2 are satisfied, then we call this a semigroup. Okay, so this is our second property, our second axiom, and then let's go and define other axioms. So the third axiom is called existence of an identity element. Okay. What does that mean? That means there exists an element, I will call it as E in the set G, such that when E is composed with Gi, or when Gi is composed with E, we will get Gi for all Gi. So there must exist some element like this. Such an element should be there. That's it. Okay. So as usual, let me give you an example of a set where this is not there. Example. So you consider n plus. Okay. So this n plus is closed, as we have seen, and this n plus is also associated. But there is no identity. There is no identity. Why? Because zero is not in n. Zero is the additive identity. You want to add any number to some element such that the number does not change, then it has to be zero. So this zero is not there in n, and hence there is no identity. Now to include this identity, so suppose you define a set. I call it as W, which is equal to 0, 1, 2, etc. Suppose you define a set like this. These are what called set of whole numbers, and then define an algebraic structure W plus. Okay, in this set you have an identity. Okay, so this is closed, this is associative, and then identity exists. Right? So this is the existence of identity. And so at this level, let me say that a semi-group, what do we mean by a semi-group? The one which is closed and which has associative property. A semi-group with identity element. Is called a monoid. It's not a name which is very much used, but there is a name like that. So since there is a name, I'm just writing it. Okay, so it is called a monoid. Now let's go to fourth property, or fourth axiom that an algebraic structure should satisfy. This is called existence of inverse element, existence of inverse elements. That is, for every gi in G, okay, there must exist an element Gj in G such that Gi composed of Gj or Gj composed of Gi should be equal to identity element. Then we say, so we denote Gj as Gi inverse. Gj as Gi inverse. This should be valid for every element. For every Gi, there should be an inverse element, such that when the element and the inverse element are composed, you get the identity element of that group. Okay. So now let us look at the example for which inverse is not there. So, for example, you take this algebraic structure W plus. Okay, as we have seen, this is closed and this is associative, and identity exists. But no inverse element. No inverse for any element. Because if I take a positive element, how will I get 0 when I combine something? There are no negative numbers in this. So there is no inverse element for any element. Okay. So what we will do, we will take this as Z plus. Okay. So this last requirement of not having an inverse element is by introducing all these negative integers, we can, if you take the full set of integers, then this is closed, as we have shown already. This is associative, and this has identity exists. Identity exists, and for every m in Z, minus m in Z is its inverse, and minus m is there. Okay, and so if you so an algebraic structure satisfying one to four is called a group. So what does that mean? That implies this integers with plus is a group. Okay, integers with plus is a group. So this is one example of a group. So we have defined the group, and I would like to just write one more axiom. So let me call this as 5. This is called commutativity. Commutative property. That is, for every gi, comma gj in capital G, gi composed gj is same as gj composed gi. Okay. Then we say that then the group is said to be an abelian. Okay. This is this name is in honor of mathematician Abel, who made a lot of contributions to group theory. So this is called an abelian group. So we have a group, and then if a group has this commutative property, then we have what is called an abelian group. Okay. So any questions at this level? This we have defined. We have spent some half an hour or so in defining what a group is. So any doubts or any questions?
Good morning, sir.
Yeah, good morning.
Sir, that E identity element is 0 or 1?
Yeah, so if it is, so what is identity depends on what is your binary operation. So if your binary operation is plus, then the additive identity is 0. Okay, you can also have a binary operation to be a multiplication. Okay, if it is a multiplication, then your identity will be 1. So we cannot talk about identity. Whatever you want to talk about a group, we should always talk two things you should keep in mind. What is the set and what is the binary composition?
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. Any other question?
Sir, in the first page,
Yeah. One of David Smita. Am I audible? Just David Smita is asking something. After that, I'll come to you.
Sir, in the first page itself, when you define that binary composition, like you introduced the term codomain, so I
Correct.
did not understood that whole sentence.
Okay. So okay. So let me just try to say this. So here, for any function, okay, for any function, you will have a set A and a set B, correct? This is called domain, and this is called codomain, correct? This is usually our set theory language, correct? This is called domain, this is called codomain. Now, when I am defining a binary composition, I am very sure about this domain, but I am not sure about this one, so I am calling it as some codomain. But if you want to have another way to tell a closure property, is that a binary operation with closure property. So closure property means this codomain has to be G only, because composition of two elements will give another element in G only, right? So closure property tells you that the codomain is G only. Okay, but if it is not closed, then I'm not sure. For example, I gave an example here of minus. If I combine two elements, I will get something which is not in N, right? So in this particular example, okay, so in this example, for my binary composition, which is defined from N cross N, what is my codomain? My codomain is Z, not N. And that is why it is not closed. Okay. If this is N only, that means you take any two and then combine with the minus, then it is coming to N, then it is closed. If it is not closed, then the codomain will not be same as the set itself. Okay.
So, sir, codomain is basically the range of the function. I mean, I was familiar with the word range.
Correct. Right now, you can say that there is no difference between these two.
Okay, sir.
Yeah, Samita.
Excuse me, sir. This is Samarth, sir.
Yeah, Samarth.
Sir,
sorry.
I was asking,
Samarth.
yeah. So, sir, I was asking, like, for any algebraic structure, if the inverse exists, then what we can comment about its physical nature of that algebraic structure? Like, can we say that that algebraic structure is having something reversible nature, or what we can comment physically?
Your first sentence was not clear to me. What was the first sentence?
So, like, for any algebraic structure, the inverse exists.
Inverse. Okay.
Yes, sir. Then what we can comment about the nature of that algebraic structure, like physically, whether we can say that that algebraic structure is following some reversible nature or not.
So at this stage, this is just an algebraic structure in the sense that so if you are thinking that see, it all depends on what are these elements, right? Right now, I did not say anything about the nature of these elements. But if you say that you are considering a set where these elements are some kind of operations done on some structure or some function, something like that, then the inverse will have an interpretation that you are suggesting. Like if let's say that if it is functions of time, then you can talk about time reversal. As functions of space, then you can talk about parity and things like that. So at this moment, I'm not really saying anything physical about this set. But the moment you say something physical, which we should do, of course, when we say something physical, then you have all these interpretations that inverse element is doing something and undoing what you have done is what is the inverse. Okay, such things one can interpret that way. Okay, but at the level of algebraic structure, right now I am simply saying that, except that you will be able to generate an identity by composing it with that element, there is nothing more I am ascribing. But definitely what you are saying is relevant when we take some physical examples.
Okay, sir. And sir, I have another question. Like when we talk about the existence of identity element, so then how we actually plot from the set of domain to its set of codomain?
Identity element, when we say, see, what I am saying is that every element that composes with identity will be same element. Correct? So what I'm trying to say is that if you say that you have, so at this point you want to write it like this. So let's say that this element is, let's say, G cross G to G. That is what it is. Now suppose one of the element is E composed with any other element, let's say Gi, then this is GI only. So this is the mapping. Correct. E with GI is only GI. Correct. That is
Okay.
how we will see in the composition.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir.
Yeah. Any other question?
Hello, sir.
Yeah.
Sir, before going to group theory, I have a doubt that why we need this group theory. I mean, what is the importance to study the group theory and how it is associated with the conservation?
Okay.
And in the starting, you have written that group theory is associated with symmetry, set invariance, conservation, regeneracy. So, can you please just elaborate, like in which field do we need all these things and how it is associated with all these things?
Yeah. Yeah. Sure. So, okay. So now that on the definition of the group, are there some questions? Is there any question or a doubt or a comment? If there are no questions, then shall I proceed? Okay. Now, so let us try to let's try to say that. So now we have understood what a group is. Okay. So right now, what we understand is that we have a set G with a binary composition, I am defining this binary composition as some O here. Okay. A set G with a binary composition forms an algebraic structure algebraic structure is a very general name, which I denote it as G comma O. Okay. Or it's not that it forms, it is just denoted. Maybe I should not say it forms. Okay. Is an algebraic structure, GO. And this GO, okay, so GO satisfies 1 to 4 axioms, then it's a group. A group, and also 5, then it is an abelian group. So this is the summary of what we have discussed so far. Now, why should we worry about this? Okay, so let's ask this question. Why group here? Now, we talk about symmetry. Okay, so what is the meaning of symmetry? So we consider some system, and the system can be some structure. Okay, this structure, this may be a structure of a molecule, or this may be a structure of a crystal structure. Okay, some structure is there. Or we may have some system defined by some Lagrangian or Hamiltonian. Okay, we may have a system defined by Lagrangian and the Hamiltonian. That means, for example, let's say you have electromagnetic field that can be defined by a Lagrangian or a Hamiltonian, or you have a field of electron defined by the Dirac field. So you can have a Lagrangian or Hamiltonian. So your system can be a Lagrangian or a Hamiltonian, or it can be a geometrical structure like a molecular structure. So let us say you have some molecule like methane, for example. It has certain molecular structure, or some crystals. Okay, let us say sodium chloride, you have some crystal structure for that. Okay, so your system can be any of these things. Now, every such system is said to possess some symmetry. What do we mean by that? Now, symmetry means you can think of certain symmetry operations. Okay. Now, what are these operations? These operations can be translation, or rotations, reflections, and are a combination of these things. Okay. Or there are certain things called gauge transformations or gauge changes. Okay, in electrodynamics, you study some gauge transformations. So there can be several such symmetry operations. Now, what happens that system remains invariant under a set of symmetry operations. Under a set of symmetry operations. Okay, system remains invariant under a set of symmetry operations. If that is so, then we say that the system possesses that symmetry. Now, the set of symmetry operations is what is very important. Okay. Now, this set of symmetry operations forms a group. Okay, but I did not tell you what is the binary operation. Okay, binary operation is basically you so the binary composition rule is you have physically successive operations. That means you first perform one operation and then perform another operation. Now, it turns out the result of performing two successive operations will be equivalent of performing one of the operations that is there in that set. Then we say it is closed. Okay, so physically successive operations is basically composition rule. Now, mathematically, if a symmetry operation will be represented by a mathematical quantity, right? So it may be represented. Suppose if it is a rotation, it may be represented by a rotation matrix. Okay, so mathematically, it is the composition of elements representing physical symmetry operations. Okay. Representing physical symmetry operations. For example, a rotation by an angle theta about let's say z axis in 3 dimension is represented by a matrix. Okay. A matrix like this: cos theta minus sin theta 0, sin theta cos theta 0, 0, 0, 1. Okay. Then the binary composition is matrix multiplication. Okay. So this is the structure that we have. So now, once we understand that the symmetry of a system or the set of symmetry operations of a system forms a group, then all that we are going to learn in group theory will be useful tools to analyze this system. Okay. So at this moment, I am trying to just say that there is a very important connection. For example, suppose if you take a particular structure, let's say a molecular structure, something like this, then you can actually use the tools of group theory and then predict how many IR infrared absorption peaks you will get in that material if you are doing infrared spectroscopy, or if you are doing a Raman spectroscopy, how many absorption peaks you will get. So you will be able to use the language of group theory and get information about the spectroscopy of the material. Similarly, crystal structures, using group theory, you will be also able to predict. So you can use group theory in conjunction with the X-ray diffraction to get a lot of information about the structure of the. So there is, and more importantly, even though I will not say more about it now, but I must tell you that the fundamental theory that we have now of particles, elementary particles, that is called standard model. Okay, standard model of elementary particles okay. Essentially, when I say standard model of elementary particles, when I say it is the Lagrangian, corresponding to the standard model of elementary particles is invariant under a gauge symmetry group of course, which is called SU3 cross SU2 cross U1. If you don't understand what these are, don't worry. But I'm just telling you that there is some group which is defined by this kind of symbols. And what I wanted to tell you is that large amount of progress in elementary particle theory, including the discovery of quarks, etc., has been done because of the applications of group theory. So it is this invariance and then identification of symmetry in the Lagrangian or the Hamiltonian that helped people to identify some kind of a pattern among the zoo of particles that have been discovered in 50s and 60s, and then a standard model of particle physics has become possible because of this underlying identification of this underlying symmetry in the Lagrangian. Okay, so this is roughly. I think I cannot state the importance of group theory any better than this, and I am sure you understand how important these ideas are and the techniques are. Now, of course, I've also mentioned in the beginning that invariance, which I anyway talked about here, and then conservation and degeneracy, that is very important. So there is a theorem due to someone called Emmy Noether. Okay, so Emmy Noether. So this is a lady mathematician, which was very uncommon even in Europe those days. So she had a theorem which is called Noether's theorem, which says that every continuous symmetry of a Lagrangian, for every continuous symmetry of a Lagrangian, there is a conserved quantity. Okay, so invariance or the symmetry of the Lagrangian is related to existence of conserved quantities. That is called Noether's theorem. I will not go into details today, but I will certainly prove this theorem and then show you how to construct those conserved quantities starting from the Lagrangian, maybe in one of the classes later, after we develop group theory to an extent that we talk about continuous groups. Then we will talk about Noether's theorem, and then I will definitely show you a way of constructing the conserved quantities from the invariance properties. Okay, so Emmy Noether's theorem gives you the connection between what is called the invariance, symmetry, invariance, and conserved quantities. Okay, so we will talk about Noether's theorem in detail. So this we will keep it for later. And of course, degeneracy is another aspect of quantum mechanics. So when you talk about quantum systems, wherever there is a conserved quantity, then there is a degeneracy. That is not very difficult to see. For example, if you say that, suppose, let's say there is some quantity, let's say that you have a Hamiltonian for the system, and there is some quantum state H psi is equal to E psi, for example. This is an eigenstate of Hamiltonian. Eigenvalue is E. Okay, Hamiltonian is an operator. So there is another property A, and let's say this property is conserved. Okay. Now, if this property is conserved, that means you can say that the commutator of A and H, commutator of H with A will be 0. Okay, commutator of A with A. So some conserved quantity is there, means its commutator with A will be equal to 0. Or if commutator of A with H equal to 0 implies it is conserved. Okay, so this is something which you can also see in classical mechanics. In classical mechanics, if A is conserved, so A will be some function of let's say Q and P is conserved. Okay, if A is conserved, then the Poisson bracket of A with H will be equal to 0. Okay, this is Poisson bracket. So Poisson bracket and the commutator are related. When you take a classical system and go to quantum system, you replace Poisson bracket by commutator. So this is HA is equal to 0. That means what? Your HA is equal to AH. That means the operation, order of the operation is unimportant. Now you consider A acting on psi. Okay, consider A acting on psi. Now psi is not an eigenstate of A, so in general this will be some other state. Okay, let us call this phi. Now we ask a question: what is H acting on phi? It turns out that H acting on phi is HA into psi. But I can write this as AH into psi because HA is same as AH into psi. But I already know what is H psi. H psi is equal to E psi. Now E is just a number or is a constant, so I can pull that out. That is A psi. But what is A psi? Is simply phi. So what is that we got? We got H phi is also equal to E phi. That means we have psi and A psi that is equal to phi. These are two states or two wave functions having same value of energy E. That means what? This E is degenerate. E is degenerate. So a conserved quantity will always lead to degeneracy. Okay, so this is the connection between conservation and degeneracy. I'm just arguing this in a simple case, but more rigorous arguments can be given. I'm just trying to give a very simple argument to just show you the connection. Okay, so this is in some sense the bigger picture where the group theory and physically relevant symmetries of the system and its conservation and degeneracy are important. Okay, so I do not know if what Mona Lisa wanted is, Mona Lisa, did you want this connection?
I felt it so vast, like some I didn't get and some I got. So I think coming with the kind of quantum mechanics and other courses when I will have, I can relate these things.
Yeah, sure. So it is not that whatever I said everybody should understand, but I want you to get a feel that there is a relevance in many fields. So it is very important to get basic tools correct so that we will be able to apply correctly in the other fields.
Thank you, sir.
Hello, sir.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm Ilyas, sir.
Hi, Elias, tell me.
Sir, I don't understand the degenerate part. And how E and SI has, how phi and SI has the same energy? Yes.
So did you understand this step, what I have written? SI, see, when an operator is operating on some state, it will in general be some other state. I am calling it as phi.
Yes, sir.
Now I am asking a question. What will be the action of Hamiltonian acting on phi? But phi is nothing but a psi, correct?
Yeah. Yes,
That is
sir.
what I have defined. But I know H into A is A into H because H and A commute with each other. You follow?
Yes, sir.
HA is AH. But I know that H psi is E psi. That is the definition of psi. Correct? So I start with H psi equal to E psi because H and A commute. H phi is also equal to E phi. That means psi and phi are two different states with the same eigenvalue. So if you have two different states with the same eigenvalue, then we say that eigenvalue is degenerate, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So that's the simple argument. But if you have not studied about degeneracy in your BSc, then you will have some difficulty. In that case, don't worry. You just wait till we do it in quantum mechanics. At that time, we can come back to this point.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Any other question?
No, sir.
Okay.
Hello, sir.
Yes.
Sir, regarding abelian group,
Hmm.
please give an example of a group that is not an abelian group.
Oh, okay. Yes. We did not give that, is it? Okay. So I think when I talked about abelian group, I thought it is going to be over, so I did not worry about example. Good, it's nice you reminded me. Okay. So an example of a group that is not abelian. Okay. So let us consider G to be set of non-singular 2x2 matrices. Okay. You can say that matrices with real elements. It's a real matrix. That means you are having a G to be A, B, C, D. It's a 2x2 matrix such that A, B, C, D are real numbers and AD minus BC is not equal to 0. Okay. This is the set of matrices. And then you define this O as matrix multiplication. Okay, you define this as matrix multiplication. Okay, now if you ask what is this GO, this is a group. Okay, which you can easily prove. You multiply any two 2x2 matrices, you will get another 2x2 matrix. because they are non-singular matrix, every matrix its inverse exists. And what is identity? Identity is simply identity matrix 0, 1, 1, 0, 0, 1. And for every A, B, suppose if you take a matrix A, which is equal to, let's say, A, B, C, D, and then A inverse, okay, is 1 by AD minus BC into B minus B minus C A, right? So this is its inverse. So for every A, inverse exists, identity exists, and associativity will be there that you can check easily. And closure is there. It's a group, but it's not an abelian group. Okay, it's not an abelian group because the product, the matrix multiplication is not commutative. Correct? So you can always think of any example. Let's say but G is not abelian. Not abelian. So I want you can I will leave it as an exercise for you to find a counter example. So find two matrices A comma B such that AB is not equal to B. You will be able to find. Okay. So this is an example of a non-abelian group. Now, suppose if you instead of matrix multiplication, if you take matrix addition, okay, so same set, okay, same set.
Sir, AB is not equal to BA or equal to BA?
We should. I am claiming that it is not abelian. That means I must show that AB is not equal to BA. Correct? If AB is equal to BA, then there is no use. No. See, for example, one of them you take as identity, then it is always AB equal to BA is true, right? So for some elements, maybe AB is equal to BA, but if it is abelian, then AB should be equal to BA for all elements. If you are able to show one pair for which it is not equal, then that is enough to say that it is not abelian. You understand?
Yes, sir.
So same set G, but if you take this operation to be matrix addition, then what can you say? Matrix addition. Is it a group or is it an abelian group? Same set G, but you take matrix addition.
So matrix addition will follow the exam 5, I mean commutative property.
Commutative property. Okay.
So
Any
abelian.
other? So it's an abelian group.
It will be abelian group for addition. Matrix addition.
It will be abelian group for addition. Okay. So, so what is so now let me give you this case. Suppose I take A, which is equal to 1, 0, 0, 1. Okay, now I take B, which is equal to 1, 0, 0, minus 1. So you know that A is in G, B is also in G, correct? Because these are real numbers and this determinant is non-zero. Now what is A plus B? Matrix addition. What is A plus B? Is 1 0 0 0. Is this in G? Is A plus B in G?
No, sir.
No, because it is singular. Okay, so A plus B is not in G. So what does it mean? Is not in G. What does it mean? It's not closed. The closure property itself is not satisfied. So it's not a group at all. You understand? So when I asked you, you try with the same G and matrix addition, you are only checking that abelian property, assuming that all other properties are fine. But every time you change anything, you have to check all the properties. You understand? We should not jump to conclusions by just assuming that all of them will be fine. Why? They need not. Every change is can affect all the properties, right? So set of non-singular matrices, non-singular 2 by 2 matrices with matrix addition is not a group at all. Follow? So it's not a group at all. So you have to look at all the properties with a given set and a given matrix, a given binary operation. So if you change binary operation, you have to check everything again. Okay, so it is not closed. So that means if you take this G with matrix addition, it's not closed. And hence we cannot call it a group. Okay, so but if you take set of all 2 by 2 matrices, then under matrix multiplication it will not be a group, because singular matrices will not have inverse. But under matrix addition it will form a group. Follow? So now if you define G as set of all 2 by 2 matrices, then G plus is an abelian. G plus is an abelian group. Then it is fine. Then it is correct. It is an abelian group. But G matrix multiplication is not a group. Why it is not a group? Because no inverse exists for singular matrices. Singular matrix. So it's not a group. It is up to identity you can define, but you cannot define inverse factor. So it's not a group.
Sir, in
Yeah.
the previous example that you given, that the matrix addition, whether it is I mean group or abelian group or something that, but I think you did not mention there that the matrices should be singular or non-singular like that. That's why.
No, I said say. See, I wrote here no same set G. That means whatever set I have defined here. Right.
Okay, sir.
So I defined G here as a set of non-singular matrices, and here I said same set G with the matrix addition. Correct. So that means I meant that it is a set of all non-singular matrices. Okay, it doesn't matter if you missed that one and you thought that is not so, it is fine. That means you got another example, that is fine. But I want you to appreciate that if you take same set and just change the binary operation to matrix addition, it doesn't even form a group. That you appreciate, right? Because it is not closed.
Sir?
Yeah.
For the G plus group, does an inverse exist?
For
G plus.
yeah, for the all set of 2 by 2 matrix, singular matrix also is there, right?
But what is inverse? For a G plus, if you consider your G plus, this is matrix addition, right? So if you have A, B, C, D, you are going to add it, right? So that will be minus A, minus B, minus C, minus D. Will give you 0, 0, 0, 0. This is the additive identity group.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So inverse exists because it is addition, not multiplication. Okay. So this is the identity for G plus, not 1001. 1001 is the identity for G matrix multiplication. Fine.
Okay, sir, understood.
Okay. So if there are no other questions, then I will try to I'll try to just make a few more concepts clear today. Then we will.
Hello, sir.
Yes.
For the exercise given to find that counter example, right?
You found it?
Yeah, AB not equal to BA.
Uh-huh.
Should A and B belong to set of G, or can we take any other set?
No, they should be in set G.
Like the 2 by 2 matrices only.
Yeah, but you should not take singular matrices. They should be non-singular 2 by 2 matrices. Because, see, if you are taking from some other set, then even if you show AB is not equal to BA, it is not useful, no.
Okay.
If you look at all those axioms, we are saying that for all elements Gi, Gj in G, Gi composed Gj should be equal to Gj composed Gi. That's what we wrote, right? So we should not go out of G at all.
Okay, sir. Yes.
Okay. So let us okay. So now we will take so let us define, let's introduce something called group multiplication table. Okay, here this word multiplication is used in a very generic sense. We should actually call some group composition table or something like that. But generally it is called multiplication table, and this I think is, some people also call it as a Cali table or something like that. Even though it's not very much used in physics textbook, but some people call it Cali table. So suppose if you have let's say we are having a group G, and then there is a binary operation O, and let's say this group G are having G1, G2, etc., some Gn minus 1, and then there is of course an identity element E. Okay, so that means this is your this is the set. Okay, and before I talk about group multiplication table, let me define something called order of the group. Order of the group is equal to number of elements number of elements in the set G, or you can also call it as cardinality of. So in this particular case, I will say that order of, maybe I should not use this one, or let me use order of G is equal to n, because there are n elements in this. Now in group multiplication, what we do is that we say that we have this group multiplication table here, operation here, and then we write G1, or let me write E here, E, G1, G2, etc., Gn minus 1. And E here, G1, G2, etc., Gn minus 1. Now what you do, you compose E with this. E with E is E, E with G1 is G1, E with G2 is G2, Gn minus 1. Now G1 with E is G1, G2 with E is G2, etc., Gn minus 1. Now G1 with G1, I don't know what it is, but whatever it is, but it will be one among the group elements because it is closed. So I will put that element here. Now G1 to G2 will be another element in G. I will put that element here. So like that, I will write down all the elements which are the result of binary composition. Since it is a binary composition, I am composing one element from the column and one element from the row, and then write that as the matrix position of that one. So this is called the group multiplication table. Now there is an important theorem called rearrangement theorem. Rearrangement theorem. What this rearrangement theorem states you that every row and every column, of, let me write this as GMT, namely group multiplication table, every row and every column of GMT, okay, contains every element of G once and only once. What does that mean? That means, suppose you take any row of the G multiplication table or any column of the group multiplication table, it will contain every element of G and it will not occur twice. It will contain only once. Every element will be there, every element will be there only once. What does that mean? That means every row of this group multiplication table is G itself, but not in the same order in which you have G, but it is permuted in some fashion. That's all. So maybe your G is E, G1, G2, Gn minus 1, but in the second column we may have G1, G2, Gn minus 1 and E. That is a permutation of the first row. So all rows and all columns of this group multiplication table are related through some permutations. That means you can start any row and permute it in some way to go to the first row. Okay. In fact, as a set, they are same. They are in only the order in which they occur is different. Okay. So this is called rearrangement theorem. Now it is so let's try to prove this one. Okay, so let's try to write down a simple proof. Okay, so let's try to write proof of this. So let us say that so let's say that so let Gi composed of Gj is same as Gi composed of Gk. That means I have one row, because once I fix Gi, I have fixed that row. Now Gj and Gk are two elements of that row. Okay, such that Gj is not equal to Gk. That is, we have two distinct elements Gj and Gk. When you compose with Gi, both of them will be same. That means what? In that row, that element will occur two times. Whatever is the element, Gi Gj is same as Gi Gk. Okay, this is our assumption. Let us assume that there are two elements in the row to be same. Okay, so in words, let us assume that two elements in ith row of group multiplication table are same. That is the meaning of this mathematical statement. Now, since G is a group, okay, since G is a group, Gi inverse exists, and that is also will be there in this group, because for every element inverse exists. Now, pre-multiply when I say pre-multiply, basically pre-operate, pre-multiply with Gi inverse. Then what we will have? We will have, so this is the equation. So we will have Gi inverse composed of Gi composed of Gj is equal to Gi. So this is what we have to do. So Gi inverse composed of Gi composed of Gk. Okay, but G is a group, so associativity property is there. So we can write, so using associativity, we can write this as Gi inverse of Gi operated on Gj, which is equal to Gi inverse of Gi operated on Gk. But what is Gi inverse of Gi? This is identity, and since it is a group, identity exists. That is identity acting on Gj, operated on, identity composing Gj, identity composing Gk. What does that mean? That means Gj is equal to Gk. So this is a contradiction, because we started with an assumption that the Gj is not equal to Gk. So this is a contradiction. our assumption that Gj is not equal to Gk. Okay, that implies Gi Gj is not equal to Gi Gk if Gj is not equal to Gk. Okay, so this is the proof of rearrangement theorem. Now, rearrangement theorem is very useful when we are actually trying to construct group multiplication tables. But let me just give you one very simple illustration of how we can use this. Okay, so let's say illustration of the use of rearrangement theorem. So let us say, suppose consider G to be just one singleton set, a single element set. Okay. So now we can ask a question: when can G be a group under some binary operation? I don't have to actually worry about this binary operation right now, but let me say that only one element is there. I want it to be a group. Under what conditions it will become a group? There is only one element, so you compose that element, it should be the same element, because otherwise closure will not be satisfied. Suppose if I take A composed with A, then I should not get something out of A. So A composed with A should be equal to A, right? So identity should exist. There is only one element, so that element has to be identity. So the condition is that A should be equal to E. This is the condition under which a singleton element can become a group. For example, you can say that I have a set S which is equal to just an element 0. Then this structure S with plus is a group. Or I can have a set T which is equal to 1, and then I have T with multiplication is a group, and so on. These are some of the examples of one element forming a group. Okay, so I'm trying to now let's ask a question that we have, let's say G, we have two elements, so A and B. Okay, now one of the element has to be identity. Okay, so note that one of them has to be identity. Okay, so let's say so let us say that A is equal to identity. Now what should be B? Now we will take the help of group multiplication table. Let's say I have E and B and E and B. Okay, so E into E is E, E into B is B, B into E is B, and now we have to ask what is B into B. Now, is there any doubt what is B into B? There is no doubt, because rearrangement theorem tells you that everything should occur once, and at least once and only once. So B has occurred, so this has to be E. So what is the condition under which this has to be B? So that means A is equal to E and B square should be equal to E. So this is the condition under which you have this to be a group. Okay, so that means A is equal to E and B square should be equal to E. Now let us say the difficulty level will start increasing if we go to higher and higher element sets. For example, let's take G is equal to A, B, C. Let's say we have 3 elements. Now you ask a question, what are the conditions under which this forms a group? So first element has to be identity. So this one we will fix it. And then let us take the help of rearrangement theorem and group multiplication table. Suppose let's say I have A, B, C here, and then I have A, B, C here. Then this is already, we call this as identity. So this will be E, B, C. This is also B and this is also C. Now B into B, okay, B into B can be E or B into B can be C. Correct? B into B can be E or B into B can be C. Now what happens? Suppose B into B, it cannot be B. So so one possibility is that it can be E. Then this one has to be B into C has to be B into B has B into C has to be C. If B into C has to be C, that means what? B is identity, but B is not identity, so we cannot have this one. So we can have only C here and E here. The moment I understand this, then I should have E here and C here. B here. Okay, so that means I'm going to have B into B to be C, and B into C should be yeah. So I should have A is equal to E. Okay, so B square is equal to C, and BC, which is actually equal to B cube, is equal to E. So this is the condition under which this 3 element thing forms a group. Now you can see that we have, in the first case, let's go back to this a little bit carefully and then see. Let's say in this case, we have a singleton element, that is identity. And in this 2 element case, I have B, and then B square is identity. 2 element set. Sorry, I think I should have written this here. So this is here, and this B square is 2 element set, that is here. And here what is that we have? I have B square, and B cube is identity. Okay, now you can realize that we can form a group of this type of any order. Okay, so here order of the group here is 3, and here order of the group is 2, and here order of the group is 1, right? So I can form this. So in general, so we can define a group with B square, B cube, b to the power 4, etc. From b to the power n is equal to e. Okay, is a group. Okay, that means in this group, what is the speciality of this group is that all elements of the group, are generated. All elements of the group are generated by one element, namely B. Okay, so here we call B as the generator of the group. Generator of the group. And the order of the generator is defined as the power n such that b to the power n is equal to identity. So in this case, order of B is 3, order of B is 2, and so on. Okay, and groups with one generator as in the above cases they are called cyclic groups. They are called cyclic groups. So you have only one generator, and the order of the generator is same as the order of the group, because the entire group is generated by one generator. Okay, but not all groups are cyclic, but those groups which have this kind of a structure are called cyclic groups. Now, I will just leave this as an exercise. I want you to ponder around this exercise and spend a little time. Suppose if you take a set of 4 elements, A, B, C, D. Suppose you have 4 elements, and then find out conditions under which A, B, C, D becomes a group. Okay. Of course, one possibility is, okay, one condition is that you have B, B square, B cube, and B to the power 4 is equal to identity. Okay, one condition is that it's a cyclic group. Okay, now show that for 4 element set, okay, a non-cyclic group exists. So please write down the group multiplication table and then use rearrangement theorem, and then show that a non-cyclic group exists. But up to 3-element group, if it is a group, it is only a cyclic group. Only for groups of order more than 3, then you have a non-cyclic groups possible. So I want you to figure out what are the conditions on ABCD such that the group will be a non-cyclic group. Okay, so I will leave this exercise. You can try to check what kind of now I want you to go through these arguments and please come up with some questions, whatever questions you have and whatever difficulties you have in the next class. And I would like you to generate maybe additional examples. I have given some examples. Maybe for each of the case, you come up with your own examples. Try to find out algebraic structures which are not closed, which are closed but not associative, which are closed and associative but identity is not there, which are where inverse is not there. So please discuss among yourselves and try to come up with some additional examples than what I have given here. So that is one exercise. And then the second exercise is, please try to look at this 4-element group and try to check what are the conditions under which this will form a group. So I will stop here, and if there are some questions, you can ask.
Excuse me, sir.
Yeah.
Sir, why we need to include identity element in the group when we are talking about the group multiplication table, sir?
See, when you talk about group multiplication table, you have to use all the elements of the group, right? So identity is also an element of the group. Correct?
Yes.
Identity is also one of the element of the group. So we should include that, because all the elements of the group we should include when we are trying to understand what is the result of the composition of any 2 elements. Since identity is one of the elements, we should include that. Isn't it?
Okay, sir.
Siddharth, you have a question?
No, sir.
You have raised your hand.
Sorry. No, sir.
Jinu Job, did you raise your hand? Oh no.
No, sir, made my mistake.
Okay. Any other question?
And sir, what book to refer for this thing, sir?
Yeah, so right now I think you should just look at some mathematical physics book, but when we do some applications, at that time I will tell you some other specialized books. So right
Okay,
now
sir.
you take up any mathematical physics book.
Okay, sir.
Okay, so if there are no other questions, then I will stop recording.